What truly caused humans to leap forward? It wasn't just walking on two legs. It wasn't just using stone tools. And it certainly wasn't just having a bigger brain than other primates. What enabled us, Homo sapiens, to dream, to paint, to tell stories, to create mythology, and to believe in the sacred? For centuries, scientists have proposed numerous theories to explain the explosion of symbolic thinking and human consciousness. The use of fire to cook food, saving digestive energy for brain development. Stone tools, the starting point of technical reasoning. Language, a means of communication that improved hunting and social cohesion. The rise of complex societies, from small bands to large tribes, which demanded brains capable of managing intricate social information. These theories make sense, but they also leave gaps. Why did this cognitive leap happen so suddenly? Why did humans begin painting caves, imagining souls, gods, and an afterlife? Then came a bizarre idea, one that sounded more like a joke than a scientific theory. What if humans became intelligent because we accidentally got high on mushrooms? That idea is known as the stoned ape theory. It wasn't proposed by a biologist or archaeologist, but by Terence McKenna, an ethnobotanist, someone who studies the relationship between humans and plants, and a radical thinker. In 1992, he published a book titled Food of the Gods, where he introduced a daring hypothesis. The rapid evolution of Homo sapiens consciousness didn't come from tools or fire, but from a species of mushroom containing psilocybin, a powerful psychedelic compound. McKenna believed that psilocybin didn't just cause hallucinations. It was a key that unlocked the doors of human consciousness. It changed how our ancestors perceived the world, how they saw reality, and how they formed abstract thought. What was the context? Roughly 2 million years ago, Africa began to dry out. The lush rainforests, where early hominins had lived in the trees, were disappearing, replaced by wide, sun-scorched savannas. Our ancestors were forced to abandon the canopy, descend to the ground, and follow herds of large animals to survive. They adapted by foraging roots, insects, and even mushrooms growing on animal dung. That, according to McKenna, was when an evolutionary accident occurred. Some hominins consumed strange mushrooms containing psilocybin and experienced hallucinations unlike anything before. In their altered states of consciousness, they saw the world in a new light. Brilliant colors, shifting forms, echoing sounds like stories being told. McKenna describes these as the first sparks of imagination, spirituality, and language. Sound like science fiction? Maybe. But the theory drew worldwide attention because it offered a radically different view of human cognitive evolution. Instead of a gradual, logical process, it was a cognitive leap triggered by a tiny biological agent that grew from the dung piles of the African savanna. And if even part of it were true, then the entire history of human civilization may have begun with a collective psychedelic experience. Did mushrooms really create modern humans, or is this just a beautiful philosophical dream detached from reality? Next, we'll dive deeper into McKenna's reasoning and uncover why this theory is both seductive and dangerously flawed. Part 2. From hallucination to language, how McKenna reimagined human consciousness. If someone told you that the origins of language, religion, and art began with eating mushrooms growing on dung, you'd probably laugh. And McKenna knew that, but he wasn't joking. According to McKenna, during foraging trips across the arid African savannas nearly 2 million years ago, our ancestors, Homo erectus, stumbled upon a humble and easily overlooked organism, the Psilocybe cubensis mushroom. This mushroom contains a special compound, psilocybin, a powerful hallucinogen that directly affects the central nervous system and the brain's cortex areas, linked to perception, emotion, and thought. But McKenna didn't stop there. He went further, categorizing psilocybin's effects by dosage and laying out an evolutionary chain from a simple trip to abstract thinking. 1. Low doses. Enhanced vision, better hunting. According to McKenna, when our ancestors consumed mushrooms in low doses, psilocybin enhanced visual acuity, especially the perception of edges, motion, and contrast, extremely useful for spotting prey or avoiding predators in open environments. He cited studies from the 1960s by Swiss pharmacologist Roland Fischer, suggesting that certain psychedelics might amplify sensory perception, making the world appear more vivid, particularly under low light conditions. If true, this would have given users a clear survival advantage in harsh wild landscapes. 2. Medium doses. Increased sexual arousal and social bonding. At slightly higher doses, McKenna claimed psilocybin stimulated sexual behavior, increased energy, sociability, and group cohesion. This led to a compelling idea. Those who regularly consumed mushrooms may have had more sexual encounters, produced more offspring, and therefore passed on more of their genes. According to McKenna, the mushrooms weren't just physiological agents. They enhanced group cooperation, laying the groundwork for early social structures. 3. High doses. Spiritual states. The birth of religion and myth. But the most provocative part of McKenna's theory wasn't about reproduction or hunting. It was about spirituality. He described that at high doses, psilocybin induced profound altered states of consciousness, where the individual ego dissolved, replaced by feelings of cosmic unity, deep emotional communion, and immersion in nature and the tribe. In these states, humans began to imagine, to connect, to create rituals, paint, sing, tell stories, and communicate in symbols. This, according to McKenna, was the dawn of abstract thinking, the moment when language, art, and religion first took shape. 4. Psilocybin as a neurological catalyst. McKenna pushed further, proposing that psilocybin stimulated brain regions responsible for memory, imagination, language, and communication. It also activated emotional centers, increasing empathy and strengthening bonds between individuals in a group. In his view, psilocybin was an evolutionary accelerant, a biological tool that unlocked complex cognition without the need for millions of years of slow natural selection. 5. Linking psilocybin to rapid brain expansion. One of McKenna's most notable arguments was the correlation between psilocybin use and the sudden growth in human brain size. From Homo habilis, 700 centimeters cubed, to Homo erectus, 1,000 centimeters cubed, and finally to Homo sapiens, 1,350 centimeters cubed. The human brain nearly tripled in volume over roughly 1 million years, a rate of change almost unheard of in the animal kingdom. McKenna asked why, and he answered, because our ancestors ate mushrooms, experienced altered states of consciousness, and from that, human awareness was born. From a psychedelic compound growing on cow dung, to the birth of language, society, and religion, McKenna presented a bold leap, a shortcut across millions of years of slow evolutionary progress. But is this leap truly convincing? In the next section, we'll step into the scientific counterarguments, where researchers dissect the stoned ape theory and ask how much of it holds up and how much is pure illusion. Part 3. Scientific counterarguments. From misunderstanding to unreality. Terence McKenna's stoned ape theory is imaginative, visually rich, and culturally compelling. But science doesn't evaluate ideas based on how captivating they are. It requires data, verifiability, and reproducible evidence. And by those standards, McKenna's theory collapses almost entirely. 1. Stoned ape is a hypothesis, not a scientific theory. First, it's essential to distinguish. This is not a scientific theory in the proper sense. In everyday language, hypothesis and theory are often used interchangeably, but in science, they are vastly different. A hypothesis is an untested idea. A theory is a well-substantiated explanation backed by repeated data and widely accepted by the scientific community. The stoned ape idea lacks archaeological evidence, genetic support, and biochemical traces in fossils or tools. It is a string of speculative assumptions, drawn from subjective experiences and outdated studies. 2. Misquoting research. Roland Fisher never said that. One of McKenna's foundational claims is based on the work of Swiss pharmacologist Roland Fisher, who conducted experiments on visual perception using hallucinogens in the 1960s. McKenna claimed that psilocybin enhanced visual acuity, especially edge detection and motion, helping early humans become better hunters. But there's a major flaw. Fisher never demonstrated that in reality. Fisher's studies showed that psilocybin distorts depth perception and spatial awareness, often leading to visual disorientation, not sharper vision. In short, seeing the world as more vibrant does not equate to better vision. Feeling like everything is vivid is a subjective illusion, not an objective enhancement. 3. Psilocybin does not alter DNA. Evolution cannot be passed through a trip. In modern evolutionary biology, only heritable traits encoded in DNA can be passed on to the next generation. Psilocybin may induce profound feelings of unity, creativity, or euphoria, but all of that exists only in the brain of the individual, lasting for a few hours and then disappearing. It does not affect genetic material, does not rewrite DNA, and leaves no biological trace for descendants to inherit. Therefore, spiritual experiences do not produce intelligence genes. McKenna tried to argue that individuals who consumed psilocybin had more sexual activity, more offspring, and thus passed on their mushroom-friendly genes. It sounds plausible on the surface, but there is no archaeological evidence showing widespread, systematic mushroom use over a long enough period to impact population genetics. 4. What about Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo longi? If mushroom consumption equals brain expansion were true, we'd expect to see similar cognitive leaps only where psilocybin naturally occurs. But reality completely undermines this argument. Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Siberia, and Homo longi in China all had brain sizes equal to or larger than Homo sapiens, yet lived in cold climates where psilocybin mushrooms did not grow naturally. Conversely, Homo floresiensis, a species with a much smaller brain, lived in Indonesia, where such mushrooms might have been accessible. This shows that brain evolution is not linked to a single substance or specific geography, but was a global, multifactorial process that occurred independently in various hominin lineages across millions of years. 5. Human brain evolution was cumulative, not a sudden leap. Consider these milestones. Australopithecus, about 400 to 500 centimeters cubed. Homo habilis, about 700 centimeters cubed. Homo erectus, about 1,000 centimeters cubed. Homo sapiens, about 1,350 centimeters cubed. This gradual increase took over 2 million years. Each step was shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of natural selection, environmental shifts, and adaptive behavior. It was slow accumulation, not a magical jump triggered by eating a mushroom. Outdated Lamarckian thinking, experience, inheritable traits. A major flaw in McKenna's logic is his reliance on Lamarckian reasoning. The idea that experiences or acquired traits can be passed to offspring. For example, if a person has a visionary experience and becomes more creative, will their children inherit that creativity? Modern genetics rejects this entirely. Evolution doesn't record feelings, beliefs, or temporary mental states. It only encodes genetic changes that confer a survival or reproductive advantage, and only if those changes are heritable. Conclusion: a seductive hypothesis, but a scientific dead end. The stoned ape theory reads like a rock anthem of evolutionary thought, bold, provocative, and full of imaginative flair. But science is not a soundtrack. It demands evidence. And so far, no archaeological record of widespread psilocybin use, no biochemical traces in ancient remains, no genes linked to psychedelic-induced traits, no biological mechanism connecting hallucinations to evolutionary leaps. In the next part, we'll explore a different question. Even if psilocybin didn't create modern humans, could it have shaped our earliest spiritual rituals, myths, and artistic expressions? Part 4. Reality. Psychedelics in Ancient Spirituality. Psychedelics didn't create humanity, but humans, from the earliest times, sought them out as gateways into the inner mind. While the stoned ape theory doesn't hold up under evolutionary biology, it does provoke a deeper question. What role might substances like psilocybin have played in shaping ancient rituals, mythology, and spiritual culture? 1. The mushroom shaman painting. When religion and fungi became one, in the Tassili and Azure Desert of southern Algeria lies a remarkable collection of prehistoric rock art carved over 7,000 years ago. Among depictions of animals, humans, and ceremonies, one painting stands out. A human-like figure covered in elaborate patterns with mushroom-like shapes sprouting from its head and arms. Researchers have named it the mushroom shaman. It's not accidental. This painting is considered one of the earliest pieces of evidence suggesting that psychedelics were tied to spiritual practice in prehistoric times. No one can say for certain whether the figure was tripping, but the expression, the movement, and the spiral symbols evoke a state of trance, elevation, or spiritual transformation. 2. Global shamanic traditions. When psychedelics became ritual, from the Amazon rainforest to the icy tundras of Siberia. From Mongolian steppes to Australian deserts, shamans appear in almost every ancient culture. They are the bridge between worlds, the visible and the invisible, body and spirit, life and death. And one of their primary tools for journeying was herbs, mushrooms, and roots containing hallucinogenic compounds, such as ayahuasca, iboga, peyote, datura, and of course, psilocybin. These substances were not used casually, not for entertainment or pleasure. They were sacred medicines reserved for initiation rites, healing rituals, rainmaking ceremonies, and communication with ancestors. They were tools for dissolving the ego, for touching the unseen, not unlike prayer or sacred drums in modern religions. 3. Music, dance, and trance, natural psychedelics of the body. Psychedelics weren't the only way ancient people altered consciousness. Humans also used movement and sound to enter expanded mental states. In many ancient rituals, drumming patterns repeated endlessly. Dancers spun in circles without stopping. Chants and songs lasted for hours. These practices led to a state called trance, a deep altered consciousness where perception shifted, time slowed, and the individual merged with the group. This was the inner pathway, a way to meet ancestors, deities, or the deepest parts of the self. Psychedelics were simply one of many tools to access that state. 4. From visions to myth, from sensation to culture. What people saw in altered states wasn't just color and light. They saw meaning. They heard sounds they had never imagined. They met supernatural beings and then told stories about what they had seen. From those stories emerged oral myths and legends, concepts of the afterlife, rituals for healing and honoring the dead, symbol systems and sacred languages. Psilocybin and substances like it may not have altered our genes, but they likely seeded symbolic culture, shared spiritual experiences, and timeless mythologies. No, our ancestors didn't become Homo sapiens just because they ate mushrooms, but they may have gathered around the fire, eaten a small cap, and seen the world shimmer like a song. In that moment, art began, faith emerged, the soul awakened. Psilocybin wasn't the engine of biological evolution, but it may have been a cultural spark, a catalyst for the inner journey, and a part of what has always driven humans, ancient or modern, to reach beyond themselves. The next and final chapter asks the deeper question. Was the stoned ape theory a psychedelic delusion, or a mirror reflecting humanity's oldest longing? Part 5, Conclusion. Fascinating, but not fact. The stoned ape theory is one of the most bizarre hypotheses ever proposed in the study of human origins, and also one of the most captivating. It doesn't just present a scientific idea, but paints a vivid narrative. Ancient hominins roaming the savannah, stumbling upon a magical mushroom growing from dung, and suddenly unlocking the door of consciousness, where language, music, and religion were born. It's wild, it's mystical, it's viral, but a seductive idea doesn't mean it's true. No archaeological evidence. There are no mushroom cooking hearths, no processing tools, no fossilized teeth or bioresidues, no ancient pottery or preserved containers indicating long-term systematic psilocybin consumption. No Paleolithic civilization left behind drawings or written records clearly documenting the ritual use of hallucinogenic mushrooms. No biological evidence. Psilocybin doesn't alter DNA. It doesn't create new genes. It doesn't pass on the trip through generations. No matter how intense its effects may be, they exist only for a few hours inside the user's brain and then disappear entirely. There is no evolutionary mechanism that accepts have a psychedelic trip, pass it on genetically. No global pattern. If psilocybin was a key driver of brain growth, we'd expect to see clear evidence of its use across many human groups in many regions. But instead, Neanderthals in Europe, Homo longi in East Asia, Denisovans in Siberia, all had large brains and complex behavior, yet there's no sign they encountered psilocybin in their environments. This strongly suggests that cognitive evolution resulted from multiple factors, not from a single species of mushroom growing in the African savanna. Science runs on evidence, not inspiration. Researchers like Dr. Andrew Gallimore, expert in psychedelic neuroscience, and Dr. John Hawkes, renowned paleoanthropologist, agree on one key principle. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The stoned ape theory has neither. They don't deny the powerful effects psychedelics can have on perception and experience. But that's not enough to claim they shaped human evolution. Still, this hypothesis holds value. The stoned ape theory doesn't need to be factually correct to offer something meaningful. It reminds us that humans have always been curious about consciousness, that we're driven to explore what lies beyond the visible, the ordinary, the explainable, that our evolution isn't just physical, it's emotional, spiritual, symbolic. Across millions of years, altered states, whether through trance, music, fasting, or fungi, may have contributed small but significant pieces to the mosaic of human culture. Humans weren't just born to survive, we were born to seek meaning. The evolution of Homo sapiens didn't come from a divine psychedelic spark. It came from millions of years of struggle, creativity, learning, and adaptation. One step, one challenge, one breakthrough at a time. If psilocybin played a role, it wasn't the engine of our biological evolution, but perhaps a side path, a spiritual tangent, a fleeting vision within the vast canvas of our shared history. A tiny, beautiful piece in the grand story of what it means to be human. Today, as psilocybin re-enters public discourse through modern research in medicine, psychotherapy, and consciousness studies, McKenna's old question still lingers. Where does consciousness come from? And how can we ever fully grasp it? Maybe the stoned ape theory is wrong, but the desire to reach beyond the limits of the mind, that hasn't gone anywhere. If you're curious about human evolution, the mysteries of consciousness, and the forgotten theories buried beneath time, subscribe to our channel. Here, you'll explore the strangest, most controversial hypotheses in history. Revisit ancient events through a fresh, critical lens. Uncover secrets still buried in the dust of time. Subscribe now. Hit the notification bell. And together, let's journey into the uncharted shadows of human history. Because the past never stops speaking to the present.